Okay. It's Ajahn Kaccāna's turn, but he's not here, so he asked me to begin the readings on their energy or persistence, depending on how you translate this one. And so I was planning to go third, so this is not probably not what I probably would have done if I was planning to go first. But I'll begin by, we're following the Anuruddha Sutta, Anguttara 8, number 30, and the section on energy is, when it was said, this Dhamma is for one who is energetic, not for one who is lazy, with reference to what was this said? Here a bhikkhu has aroused energy for abandoning unwholesome qualities and acquiring wholesome qualities. He is strong, firm in exertion, not casting off the duty of cultivating wholesome qualities. When it was said, this Dhamma is for one who is energetic, not for one who is lazy, it is reference to this that this was said. And I was thinking about this topic can be divided into at least 3 sections. One would be just the definition of right effort in terms of cultivating the wholesome and abandoning the unwholesome, and then questions of how much effort to make. And also, then the third topic would be how to motivate yourself to put forth effort when that's needed. And I was going to focus on the third of those 3. And so those are the readings that I have. And let's see, there's one of the Buddha's most compelling sections on motivating effort comes from, we chanted this I think just less than a week ago, and it comes from Anguttara Nikāya, number 12, number 22. At Savatthi, Bhikkhus, possessing the 10 powers and the 4 grounds of self-confidence, the Tathagata claims the place of the chief bull of the herd, roars his lion's roar in the assemblies, and sets rolling the Brahma wheel thus. Such is form, such its origination, such its passing away. And then continuing on with the 5 aggregates, and then going through a explanation of dependent co-arising, culminating with, such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Bhikkhus, the Dhamma has thus been well expounded by me, elucidated, disclosed, revealed, stripped of patchwork. When, Bhikkhus, the Dhamma has thus been well expounded by me, elucidated, disclosed, revealed, stripped of patchwork, this is enough for a clansman who has gone forth out of faith to arouse his energy thus. Willingly let only my skin, sinews, bones remain, and let the flesh and blood dry up in my body, but I will not relax my energy so long as I have not attained what can be attained by human strength, by human energy, by human exertion. Bhikkhus, the lazy person dwells in suffering, soiled by evil unwholesome states, and great is the personal good that he neglects. But the energetic person dwells happily, secluded from evil unwholesome states, and great is the personal good that he achieves. It is not by the inferior that the supreme is attained, rather it is by the supreme that the supreme is attained. Bhikkhus, this holy life is like a beverage of cream, the teacher is present. Therefore, Bhikkhus, arouse your energy for the attainment of the as yet unattained, for the achievement of the as yet unachieved, for the realization of the as yet unrealized, with the thought, in such a way this going forth of ours will not be barren, but fruitful and fertile. And when we use the robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicinal requisites offered to us by others, these services they provide for us will be of great fruit and benefit to them. Thus, Bhikkhus, you should train yourselves. Considering your own good, Bhikkhus, it is enough to strive for the goal with diligence. Considering the good of others, it is enough to strive for the goal with diligence. Considering the good of both, it is enough to strive for the goal with diligence. And so the motivational strategies can roughly be divided into Saṃvega, which is perceiving the drawbacks of dukkha and samsara, and then also the second one would be Pasada, which is confidence, both in the confidence in the Dhamma and confidence in one's ability to practice the Dhamma. And the Buddha gave different teachings for each one, and so I thought I would read some of the classics. You've probably heard many of these before. So this is Anguttara Nikāya 56:35, 100 spears. Bhikkhus, suppose there were a man with a lifespan of 100 years who could live 100 years. Someone would say to him, "Come, good man, in the morning they will strike you with 100 spears. At noon they will strike you with 100 spears. In the evening they will strike you with 100 spears. And you, good man, being struck day after day by 300 spears, will have a lifespan of 100 years, will live 100 years. And then after 100 years have passed, you will make the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths to which you had not broken through earlier. It is fitting, bhikkhus, for a clansman intent on his good to accept the offer. For what reason? Because this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point cannot be discerned of blows by spears, blows by swords, blows by axes. And even though this may be so, bhikkhus, I do not say that the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is accompanied by suffering or displeasure. Rather, the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is accompanied only by happiness and joy. What for? The noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, bhikkhus, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering. An exertion should be made to understand this is the origin of suffering. An exertion should be made to understand this is the cessation of suffering. An exertion should be made to understand this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. 56:47. Yoke with a hole. The bhikkhus, suppose a man would throw a yoke with a single hole into the great ocean, and there was a blind turtle which would come to the surface once every 100 years. What do you think, bhikkhus? Would that blind turtle, coming to the surface once every 100 years, insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole? If it would ever do so, venerable sir, it would be only after a very long time. Sooner, I say, would that blind turtle, coming to the surface once every 100 years, insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole, than the fool who has once gone to the netherworld would regain the human state. For what reason? Because there, bhikkhus, there is no conduct guided by the Dhamma, no righteous conduct, no wholesome activity, no meritorious activity. There prevails mutual devouring, the devouring of the weak. For what reason? Because, bhikkhus, they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. Anguttara Nikāya 13:10. At Savatthi, bhikkhus, suppose that the Himalayas, the king of mountains, would be destroyed and eliminated except for 7 grains of gravel the size of mustard seeds. What do you think, bhikkhus? Which is more, the portion of the Himalayas, the king of mountains, that has been destroyed and eliminated, or the 7 grains of gravel the size of mustard seeds that remain? Venerable sir, the portion of the Himalayas, the king of mountains, that has been destroyed and eliminated is more. The 7 grains of gravel the size of mustard seeds that remain are trifling. They do not amount to 100th part or 1,000th part or 100,000th part of the portion of the Himalayas, the king of mountains, that has been destroyed and eliminated. So too, bhikkhus, for a noble disciple, a person accomplished in view who has made the breakthrough, the suffering that has been destroyed and eliminated is more, while that which remains is trifling. The latter does not amount to 100th part, or 1,000th part, or 100,000th part of the former mass of suffering that has been destroyed and eliminated, as there is a maximum of 7 more lives. Of such great benefit, bhikkhus, is the breakthrough to the Dhamma. Of such great benefit is it to obtain the vision of the Dhamma. And then a sutta that describes some of the potential results of contemplations like this. This is Anguttara Nikāya 15:13, and it's 30 bhikkhus. At Rajagaha in the bamboo grove. Then 30 bhikkhus from Pava approached the Blessed One, all forest dwellers, alms food eaters, rag robe wearers, triple robe users, yet they were all still with fetters. Having approached, they paid homage to the Blessed One and sat down to one side. Then it occurred to the Blessed One, these 30 bhikkhus from Pava are all forest dwellers, alms food eaters, rag robe wearers, triple robe users, yet all are still with fetters. Let me teach them the Dhamma in such a way that while they are sitting in these very seats, their minds will be liberated from the taints by non-clinging. Then the Blessed One addressed those bhikkhus thus. Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, those bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. What do you think, bhikkhus? Which is more? The stream of blood that you have shed when you were beheaded as you roamed and wandered on through this long course, this or the water in the 4 great oceans? As we understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, the stream of blood that we have shed when we were beheaded as we roamed and wandered on through this long course, this alone is more than the water in the 4 great oceans. Good, bhikkhus. It is good that you understand the Dhamma taught by me in such a way. The stream of blood that you have shed when you were beheaded as you roamed and wandered on through this long course, this alone is more than the water in the 4 great oceans. For a long time, bhikkhus, you have been cows, and when as cows you were beheaded, the stream of blood that you shed is greater than the waters in the 4 great oceans. For a long time you've been buffalo, sheep, goats, deer, chickens, and pigs. For a long time you have been arrested as burglars, highwaymen, and adulterers, and when you were beheaded, the stream of blood that you shed is greater than the water in the 4 great oceans. For what reason? Because, bhikkhus, this samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. Hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. For such a long time, bhikkhus, you have experienced suffering, anguish, and disaster, and swelled the cemeteries. It is enough to be disenchanted with all fabrications, enough to be dispassionate towards them, enough to be liberated from them. This is what the Blessed One said. Elated, those bhikkhus delighted in the Blessed One's statements. And while this exposition was being spoken, the minds of the 30 bhikkhus from Pava were liberated from the taints by non-clinging. And so that's the Saṃvega side. Quite heavy stuff, but quite powerful as well. And then in terms of pasada, confidence, my own experience is these suttas are harder to find. And I remember out at Dowdum, I found one in Bhikkhu Bodhi's Anguttara anthology, which is, at that time, he had not translated the full Anguttara. So this is Book of the Ones, number 54. Bhikkhus, if for just the time of a finger snap, a bhikkhu develops a mind of loving kindness, he is called a bhikkhu who is not devoid of jhāna, who acts upon the teaching of the teacher, who responds to his advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food in vain. How much more, then, those who cultivate it? And I took note of that one. But then it turns out that when the whole Anguttara is translated, there are hundreds of suttas that follow that pattern. So, Book of the Ones 394 begins, Bhikkhus, if just for the time of a finger snap, a bhikkhu develops the first jhāna, he is called a bhikkhu who is not devoid of jhāna, who acts upon the teaching of the teacher, who responds to his advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food in vain. How much more then those who cultivate it? And it goes on through the 4 jhanas, the four Brahma Viharas. It goes through the 4 foundations of mindfulness, bhikkhus who dwell contemplating the body and the body, ardent, alert, and mindful, having removed covetousness and grief for the world, and so on. It goes through actually all 37 of the Bodhipakya Dhammas, so that's the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 bases of spiritual success or psychic potency, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 enlightenment factors, the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. Then there's a long section where it goes through a bunch of meditation themes that are, I would say, relatively obscure to me. But then it gets into more familiar territory. Again, a bhikkhu who develops any of these for a finger snap, the perception of unattractiveness, the perception of death, the perception of the repulsiveness of food, the perception of non-delight in the entire world, the perception of impermanence, the perception of suffering and what is impermanent, the perception of non-self and what is suffering, the perception of abandoning, the perception of dispassion, the perception of cessation, perceptions of impermanence, not self, death is repeated, and then goes through some of the cemetery contemplations, and then also one who develops recollection of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, recollection of virtuous behavior, generosity, recollection of the devas, the mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of death, again, mindfulness directed to the body, recollection of peace, and then many of these qualities accompanied by the jhanas, overall over 150 items. And each time the pattern is, if one develops these for even a finger snap, one is called, if one's ordained, one's called a bhikkhu who is not devoid of jhāna, who acts upon the teaching of the teacher, who responds to his advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food in vain. How much more than those who cultivate it? And so these are it's important to keep those in mind because those are helpful. And then there's another sutta that inspires Pasada in the Majjhima Nikāya. This is number 34, the Cūḷagopālaka Sutta, the shorter discourse on the cowherd. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living in the Vajrayan country at Uchachela on the banks of the river Ganges. There he addressed the bhikkhus thus. Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, there was once a foolish Magadhan cowherd who, in the last month of the rainy season, in the autumn, without examining the near shore or the further shore of the river Ganges, drove his cattle across to the other shore in the Vidayan country at a place that had no ford. Then the cattle bunched together in midstream in the river Ganges, and they met with calamity and disaster. Why was that? Because that foolish Magadhan cowherd, in the last month of the rainy season in the autumn, without examining the near shore or the further shore of the river Ganges, drove his cattle to the other shore in the Vidayan country at a place that had no ford. So too, bhikkhus, as to those recluses and Brahmins who are unskilled in this world and the other world, unskilled in Mara's realm and what is outside Mara's realm, unskilled in the realm of death and what is outside the realm of death, it will lead to the harm and suffering for a long time of those who think they should listen to them and place faith in them. Bhikkhus, there was once a wise Magadhan cowherd who, in the last month of the rainy season, in the autumn, after examining the near shore and the further shore of the river Ganges, drove his cattle across to the other shore in the Vedayan country at a place that had a ford. He made the bulls, the fathers and leaders of the herd, enter first, and they breasted the stream of the Ganges and got safely across to the further shore. He made the strong cattle and the cattle to be tamed enter next, and they too breasted the stream of the Ganges and got safely across to the further shore. He made the heifers and young oxen enter next, and they too breasted the stream of the Ganges and got safely across to the further shore. He made the calves and the feeble cattle enter next, and they too breasted the stream of the Ganges and got safely across to the further shore. At the time there was a tender calf just born, and being urged on by its mother's lowing, it too breasted the stream of the Ganges and got safely across to the further shore. Why was that? Because that wise Magadan cowherd, in the last month of the rainy season, in the autumn, after examining the near shore and the further shore of the river Ganges, drove his cattle across to the other shore in the Vedayan country at a place that had a ford. So too, bhikkhus, as to those recluses and Brahmins who are skilled in this world and the other world, skilled in Mara's realm and what is outside Mara's realm, skilled in the realm of death and what is outside the realm of death, it will lead to the welfare and happiness for a long time of those who think they should listen to them and place faith in them. Bhikkhus, just as the bulls, the fathers and leaders of the herd, breasted the stream of the Ganges and got safely across to the further shore, so too those bhikkhus who are arahants, with taints destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached their own goal, destroyed the fetters of being, and are completely liberated through final knowledge, by breasting Mara's stream, they have gotten safely across to the further shore. Just as the strong cattle and cattle to be tamed breasted the stream of the Ganges and got safely across to the further shore, so too those bhikkhus who with the destruction of the 5 lower fetters will reappear spontaneously in the pure abodes and there attain final nibbana without ever returning from that world. By breasting Mara's stream, they will get safely across to the further shore. Just as the heifers and young oxen breasted the stream of the Ganges and got safely across to the further shore, so too those bhikkhus who, with the destruction of 3 fetters and with the attenuation of lust, hate, and delusion, are once returners, returning once to this world to make an end of suffering, by breasting Mara's stream, they too will get safely across to the further shore. Just as the calves and the feeble cattle breasted the stream of the Ganges and got safely across to the further shore, so too those bhikkhus who, with the destruction of 3 fetters, are stream enterers, no longer subject to perdition, bound for deliverance, headed for enlightenment. By breasting Mara's stream, they too will get safely across to the further shore. Just as that tender calf, just born, being urged on by its mother's lowing, also breasted the stream of the Ganges and got safely across to the further shore, so too those bhikkhus who are Dhamma followers and faith followers. By breasting Mara's stream, they too will get safely across to the further shore. Bhikkhus, I am skilled in this world and in the other world, skilled in Mara's realm and what is outside Mara's realm, skilled in the realm of death and what is outside the realm of death. It will lead to the welfare and happiness for a long time of those who think they should listen to me and place faith in me. That is what the Blessed One said. When the Sublime One had said that, the teacher said further, both this world and the world beyond are well described by the one who knows, and what is still in Mara's reach, and what is out of the reach of death. Knowing directly all the world, the enlightened one who understands, open the door to the deathless state, by which the safety of Nibbana may be reached. For Mara's stream is breasted now, its current blocked, its reeds removed. Rejoice then, bhikkhus, mightily, and set your hearts where safety lies. Close there.
Really appreciated that collection of 150 suttas that you mentioned. Say that just for the duration of a finger snap of whatever recollection, one is not devoid of jhāna, those other qualities. Because I feel like a concept like jhāna can just seem so far off and abstract, but something like loving kindness, for example, can be very accessible for a lot of people, or contemplation of death or contemplation of the body or whatever. And so I just think that I find those to be very reassuring teachings, and just kind of for me hits home the fact that this is not an impossible path to follow. This is something that a human being can do, committed human being. So I appreciate you reading those suttas.
So I just want to ask this, curious. I don't know if this is a good question or not, but anyway. What did the Buddha say anything about how many ways to open the door to the deathless? Is there any specific saying that? I heard that the Brahma Vihara, right? That's one of them? I don't know.
Yeah, well, let's see. There's a sutta in the Majjhima Nikāya where I think it's actually Ananda speaking, where someone, a layperson, asks Ananda, about doors to the death. If the Blessed One has talked about a door to the deathless, and Ananda answers, his first answer is in regards to the first jhāna. Basically, someone, a practitioner develops the first jhāna, and then in that state, or either whether it's in the state or not is a debate, but with regard to that state, contemplates, whatever bit of the five aggregates are there is impermanent, is impermanent suffering, not self, and it's a list of 10, but that basically fit into those categories: a dart, a tumor, etc. And and then, so contemplating that, I believe the practitioner inclines his or her mind to the deathless. And that was the first one, and the interlocutor, the Ananda's questioner asks him, well, is there another one? And so Ananda goes through the four jhanas, all four Brahma Viharas in the same pattern. So cultivating that Brahma Vihara, and then contemplating the drawback, when it's really solid, contemplating the drawbacks of that, and inclining the mind to the deathless element. And then the first three of the immaterial attainments, the realm of infinite space, infinite consciousness, and nothingness. The only difference there being that form is not mentioned, is that one does not contemplate form in those attainments because form is not perceived, because they're formless. Neither perception nor non-perception is not mentioned. That one is apparently too subtle. So that's one list of numbered. There may be others.
So it's the Vimutayatana Sutta, Bhikkhus 5, 326, and it's like the 5 opportunities for liberation. And there's if a bhikkhu keeps his mind steadfast, keen and diligent at these times, he can achieve liberation. And the first is if someone teaches him the Dhamma, and he feels inspired. Feeling inspired, he goes glad, and then on to samadhi. And then if he's diligent at that time, he's liberated. And then if he teaches others the Dhamma, if he recites the Dhamma to himself and feels inspired, if he recites it internally, and then the last one's if a meditation object is properly grasped. So it's almost like all the ones you just mentioned actually almost fall on the last one. And it's interesting that there's other 4 very accessible ones, in this as
well. I think Ajahn Saṃvega has said that mindfulness is the door to the deathless also.
He commented on, that's the title of one of his books, and in one of his other talks he commented that he wanted, it could have been an interview, but it's in the collection, he wanted to just call it, he wanted to call that book The Paths of the Deathless, but people objected, saying that deathless had a bad ring to it. It had death in the title, so I guess they compromised and made it mindfulness, the path to the deathless. Luang Por's own comment was that for him, what was it? The deathless had always seemed, I can't remember. But he had always had a very positive connotation with the deathless.
I believe in Dhammapada verses, heedfulness of the mind.
The eternal metaphor, is it if you fall into the netherworld, so is it beings that fall into hell that have the likelihood, or is it even the animal realm that metaphor applies to? Do you know?
I have no knowledge of that.
Nether.
It did use nether, yeah. And I mean, what I appreciated about that, which there's more than one of those, but what I appreciated about that sutta is the explanation of why it's hard to get out, because it's not, there just isn't the opportunity to do good actions, and places are, and that's, I mean, whether or not it's it's exactly hell, one really wants to avoid those places where mutual devouring prevails.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. It was like mutual devouring and then like devouring of the weak.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you think about that, like, really sort of hellish human, sort of like societies and times when it's really bad, is like that's exactly what's happening.
Yep.
And there's nobody that's really practicing,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
good conduct. So really describes, some.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the human realm can get that bad. Like the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia was, hell on earth, from what I have heard.